Welcome back. We have had exciting panel discussions so far, and we are certain that you will enjoy the upcoming session too. This time we will explore how digitalization is changing the world of architecture and the opportunities that it will bring. The world's most popular and influential architecture, interiors, and design magazines. We warmly welcome Ben, his panelists, and also the audiences joining through Dezeen's platform.
Thanks, Martin. Hi, everyone. I'm Benedict Hobson, Chief Content Officer at Dezeen. And yes, I'm broadcasting live from Dezeen's studio space in London. And we're very happy to be teaming up with Graphisoft today to discuss digitalization in architecture, talking about the trends and the future directions in the digital tools we use to design, build, and manage our buildings. For those of you who are tuning in from Dezeen, this talk is part of Graphisoft's Building Together Digital Conference, which has been taking place this week. There's a whole program of talks that you can watch for free as part of that conference. Just head over to graphisoft.com to register. Anyway, back to what we're talking about in this session, digitalization of architecture. And I'm pleased to be joined by an expert panel that includes Cynthia Nkosi from Earthworld Architects. Hi, Cynthia.
Hi, how are you?
Good, thank you. We've also got Alex Hughes from KURV Architecture on the panel. Hello, Alex.
Hello, Ben. How are you?
Yes, good. Thank you. Thank you for joining us. And last but not least, we also have Kyla Kuhnlein from Graphisoft. Hi, Kyla.
Hi, Ben. Thanks for having me.
Great. So each of you prepared a short presentation, which I'll get to in a minute. But first of all, if you could tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do. Cynthia, starting with you.
So I'm Cynthia. I'm from South Africa in Pretoria. I work for a company called Earthworld Architects. I am a draftsperson at the company, but briefly, I'm also the go-to IT girl in the office. If something kind of freezes, doesn't work, I'm the first point of contact before we contact our outsourced IT company. So yeah, you'll hear more about me and the company in the presentation that I'll be giving later on.
Great. Thank you, Cynthia. And Alex, tell us a bit about yourself.
My name is Alex Hughes. I'm originally from Chile, South America. We founded our practice here in Manhattan in New York with famous industrial designer Karim Rashid. And since then, we've been practicing architecture in the East Coast of the United States. And we see more about our work and the things we do in a little bit.
Great. And then Kyla, tell us about yourself.
Hi, yeah, I am with Graphisoft North America as the Director of Client Success. I'll talk a little bit more about what that means in the presentation as well. I'm also an architect and I'm based in Portland, Oregon at the moment.
Great. Well, without further ado, let's get into the presentations. Each of you have prepared a short kind of 5-minute presentation to talk about your work and how it relates to the theme. Cynthia, we'll go straight over to you. First of all, if you want to share your screen and your presentation, and we'll get to it.
Okay, then Ben.
Great.
So yeah, as I've mentioned before, my name is Cynthia Nkosi. I'm from Pretoria in South Africa. I studied architecture at the Tshwane University of Technology. In my experience in the construction industry started over a decade ago. I'm passionate about exploring the endless possibilities of bringing concepts to reality through computer-aided drafting and design and simulation while using BIM software and management systems. I've been a part of teams that have brought to life a great number of exciting architectural projects, such as the ones clicking through here in the presentation. My experience, technical knowledge in the use of computer-aided design and simulation comes from years of leadership and mentorship under the guidance of Andre Extian and Bram de Villiers, who are the co-founders of Earthworld Architects that I'm working at. So Earthworld Architects was established about 25 years ago. They established to provide a service in professional architecture and interior architecture services amongst the extensive list of services that they offer. Earthworld's mission has matured over the 25 years to retain the simple approach to design, yet incorporating the use of sustainable materials such as timber. Earthworld's portfolio includes a broad spectrum of fields ranging from high-tech industrial clean rooms, laboratories, ecologically sensitive developments, exclusive residential and group housing. We also do additions and alterations to existing structures while trying to retain the integrity of the existing. Each project at Earthworld Architects form part of our narrative of systemic thinking, social regeneration, sustainability, and circular economy. So, so far, our biggest project has been the Future Africa Hub at the University of Pretoria. It will pop up in the next slide. The project is complete plywood structure portal system that is designed and detailed in 3D dimensional software that we developed everything here in the architect's office. Then we sent through the design and the components to be cut with CNC machines so that the components can be cut at a manufacturer site. Then those components were all of them completely assembled on site. So the complete project was mainly designed with concrete, timber, and steel. Its total floor area was about 24,000 square meters with a net floor area of just over 12,000 square meters. The hub was designed from June 2014 to October 2015. It was constructed over a period of 3 years, from November 2015 to November 2018. So this design, this hub, the design called for a multidisciplinary postgraduate facility that had to illustrate the possibilities in terms of new building technologies and innovation in building. The design of the facilities include a main administration building, a conference center, a dining hall, and a 300-bedroom residential facility. So we're looking forward to working on more bigger and better projects more effectively, especially using BIM systems that we have. Thank you, Ben.
Great, thank you, Cynthia. And before we move on to the next presentation, could you maybe talk a little bit about the kind of the digital tools you used in this project? How do you, for a project such as this one, what are the benefits that you see in terms of kind of whether that be BIM or other digital tools in helping it become a realized project?
So with the presentation of the project, we started on pen and paper, obviously. And then we moved on to doing a small scale model of what we envisioned the concept to be before we completely went digital with it. The advantage of going digital with this project was that because of its scale and the magnitude of the components that we wanted to explore, because we wanted to do something new, if I can say that, more innovative, the main focus was the development of the portal structure. If I can talk about the plywood portal structure So each and every component of that portal structure had to be worked out using a BIM model. We worked with ArchiCAD, which is a product of Graphisoft. So even the people from Graphisoft a couple of years ago, when they came to visit the office and we showed them the BIM model of what we did and how we did it, they couldn't believe that we did absolutely every detail of this project using just ArchiCAD. We did use other software to aid in the efficiency of the design of the project. So using BIM and using digital platforms for this type of scale of a project helped us in exploring the possible issues that might arise. And we kind of worked in resolving the issues in sort of real time, because we didn't have to go back to paper and try and work it out. So we could implement even the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing features into the BIM model of the project, and we could work out the possible cost implications and possible time restraints that could pop up. So I think we would have struggled and taken over maybe 5 years to do just the design had we not done it in a digital platform.
Great. Thank you, Cynthia. If you could stop sharing your screen now, and then we'll move on to the next speaker. So if you're perfect. Alex, you're up next. If you could share your screen and take us through your slides.
Sure. Thanks, Ben. So we're, as I was mentioning, we're a New York City architecture-based firm. Can you see my screen, Ben?
Yep, all good. All good.
Great. Perfect. We're very interested in proportion in architecture, human proportion, and how the computer relates to human proportion. This for us is our main subject of focus in our practice. I think everyone's seen this diagram or a version of it. I often ask people, I think everyone knows how tall they are, but very few people know how wide they are when they measure from point of the finger to the point of the finger. I challenge you to do that, because you might find a surprise when you do that. We're fascinated in Le Corbusier's algorithm studies of the human body, its proportions, how they relate. He was able to crack the code in terms of how proportions relate to space. Music uses similar proportions, and we're fascinated by that as well. We're very interested in the circle of fifths, which is a tool for composition musicians use to create chord structures in music and patterns. And we figured out how to synthesize this through computational algorithms by scripting and feeding this into Graphisoft's BIM platform. You see Pythagoras had some very interesting rules on tuning and symmetry and proportions. And so by using this tool and using some computational know-how, some Python and some hex code, which is nice for making patterns, we can capture patterns in musical instruments and feed them into a lot of our projects. And because Graphisoft speaks to Python, Maya speaks to Python, Rhino speaks to Python, we can even ArcGIS, we can pull zoning data with Python, and we can create abstract things such as patterns and cellular automata. We can also create topological studies in very complex forms that are hard to describe other ways. And then we can remember what we did, because you can go back and play the same musical sequence and get the same shape, which is very attractive to us. So we've created ways of scripting the logic of music and proportion into geometries to study how they relate to humans. This is an example of a very large data set that inputs sound and outputs geometry. That geometry is fed into ArchiCAD. You can see some of our work with some more experimentation, sound and sort of avant-garde topology and studies. But we also use this in very practical ways. This is a project we're working on where Our client is a musician. We're renovating a penthouse in Chelsea, downtown Manhattan. We have a double height space, and we asked him for some music. And by having his music, we created patterns that would be as a backdrop in an open kitchen with a stair that would otherwise be a blank wall going up. And so we tried to create some notion of art through the interpretation of music into space. And this is done on a lot of our projects. You see, we're doing something similar here to a building in Times Square that we're currently working on. We have used this for algorithms to create paneling for some of our buildings. This is a building on Madison Avenue we were working on. This is another example in the Bronx where the Voronoi pattern here was dictated by sound. This is a modular building we're working on where the modulars themselves, there's only 4 variations, but the 4 variations are scripted in a way that they don't obviously repeat. And so we get some variation that's scriptable and controllable, so we can look at a lot of variations quickly. This is a building we're working on now in the Lower East Side of Manhattan, and it happens to be the number 330, which 330 hertz is like a low E. So we got creative with the pattern, started composing things in the 330 hertz, and started seeing how that could give proportion to the facade, to the relationship between the windows and the facade, but also to the fenestration and the pattern on the cladding. And we took it further into the lobby, where instead of reaping the earth and taking another slab of marble, we started playing with AI to generate artificial patterns that resemble this, so that we could print them on porcelain and maybe save the earth from being reaped out of another piece of marble. We create patterns as well in the lobby based on the composition of that. And whether we're doing buildings where clients aren't interested in our technology, there's always a room to do it. For example, in these planters where we had to have some irrigation and some ventilation, and we decided to create a musical pattern for the perforation of the panel. Client had no idea, he could care less, but at least it gave us a reason to create something artistic and try to be inspired. We have used this technology for all our projects. We try to, every project has at least one opportunity to do this. But this is the project we're most proud of. This is an affordable housing building in Brooklyn. It's 750,000 square feet of construction, so about 75,000 square meters. It's for a church that happens to be an African-American Southern Baptist congregation. And so their most important thing is their choir and their music. And instead of giving them another generic building, because we're economically restrained, deeply so in this building, we asked them for their choir music, and we ran it through the script in order to add it to the paneling details, to the entrance, to a lot of the skin on the building, so that it wouldn't be another generic building, that their culture would somehow be represented in the building itself. And so you'll hopefully see some slides of how we've been working on this project with city funding for affordable housing, and trying to change the standard of what would be expected for a regular building of this nature. And this is the inside of the hall that we're working on, running their main theme song for the choir through the patterns of the building. And that's a quick summary of what we do and what we're focusing on.
Great, thank you, Alex. Interesting. Cynthia was talking about the way she uses kind of digital tools and BIM to kind of help with the process. You're actually using that technology to inform, if not the form, but the pattern and the actual finished building itself. I was interested that you started off talking about human, because I think maybe one concern that sometimes people have, especially when you start mentioning AI or generative design or those kind of things, is do you lose some of the humanity if you're kind of using technology to determine the kind of finished product of a building to such a large extent? What's your feeling about that? What's the relationship between the human and the digital, and where does technology like AI kind of fit into that?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. It's a question very much of our time, and it's been being discussed for many years now. I remember this debate in school when I was at Columbia University. I'm from a generation that started drawing by hand, and mid through school we switched to computers, and by the end of it we were doing animations and playing around with scripting and programming. To answer your question, there's a lot of hype about parametrics, and parametrics this, parametrics that, and I feel that parametrics, the word, the root, the etymology, right, is to just, para is to send, and metrics is a unit, right? So I think that's boring in a sense. You're just transferring data from one thing to another. There's no reason for it. So we have to remember as architects that we're designing for humans, and I think it's very important to put the quality of the space and the quality of the human perception of space, which is not only visual. Today we're on Instagram, you see a lot of sexy architecture, everybody thinks it's amazing, but it's not the same to be in a space and feel how cold it is, how warm, how noisy. There are other perceptions that are interesting to the human experience. So we try to focus on the human experience as much as possible, and we think the computer is a great tool for that. It's amazing. We've been playing lately with Midjourney and DALL-E, which are AI softwares, and you can give them concepts, plug in some words, and it generates images for you, which are outstanding in some cases. I think they're a great visual tool, but if you don't know what to tell the computer, it's not going to do it for you. You have to have a focus. You have to know what to ask for, and sometimes you have to know your goal, or at least attempt to get close to it. And the computer can create thousands of variations for you that you can filter through. And in filtering through, you might get to something that wouldn't be expected, right? But the same could be said of any tool, even if you had a spline to work with, or a rapiograph for the first time. Like, it changes the way you work. And so we create tools, and the tools affect us, and that's part of humanity, and it's always been a part of history. I have yet to see AI that'll say, hey, here's an award-winning building, we've designed it better than humans, and we didn't have to ask anyone. There's a lot of hype about AI, but we're not there yet. Maybe one day we will. And hopefully if we do, we wouldn't have to work, because they would solve everything for us, right? I mean, that's the promise, right? But we've been hearing that since the Industrial Revolution, so I don't see it happening.
Do you think there is a possibility of that? Do you think that some further version of like DALL-E or Midjourney that you could actually, it would just spit out, instead of a kind of crazy cool kind of image of something, it might say, there you go, there's your Sterling Prize winning building, or there's your Pritzker Prize?
Absolutely. I think that's bound to happen. It's a question of time. I don't think we're there yet, and I don't think there's fear of it. I mean, when the Industrial Revolution came along and they invented these machines to do the work for humans, right? The whole idea was that you didn't have to slave in a factory, you'd have a machine do it for you. And you were promised leisure. Oh, you could go home and relax, right? Well, it's not the case. We're all still working, right? And the irony is the Industrial Revolution's not over until we figure out how to feed these machines that are doing the work for us. So we have this fuel-dependent economy that's trying to feed the machine, right? And so it's not like we're working less. The work has changed, perhaps. And so, maybe it'll come to a day where the computer is doing the architecture for us and we're just feeding the machine, right? Or maybe you own the machine and charge rent for it, and your role is changed as an architect. I have no idea. I think we'll get there one day, but the fear that people have right now that it's taking over, no, I don't see that. I do see, however, fear in the fact that maybe when you put too much information on the internet, a whole bunch of bots are figuring out what to do with it, and next thing you know, you sort of get an advertisement for something you were thinking or saying, to your spouse because the microphone picked it up. Those are things to worry about. But I don't see the tool of the computer in architecture as something potentially evil, nor it taking over as God, right? We may get there one day, but we're far from it, I believe. And so in the meantime, it's really about creating tools. We in the office, we create these tools to solve things for us, so that if we have to do it again, it's easier. That project I showed you has a theater, and the theater proportions are very hard to resolve. But once we figured out the proportions, and we found some written literature about chair distances, spacing, stage height, opening, we actually scripted that, and now we can regenerate the theater. If the client tells me I need 200 seats less, I can regenerate it in quickly, right? So it's about creating tools for me, not about, the machine taking over, if that makes sense.
Great. Perfect. Thank you, Alex. Okay, over to Kyla next. If you'd like to share your screen and tell us about what you do at Graphisoft.
Sure. So hi, everyone. As I mentioned, my name is Kyla Kuhnlein, and I'm here as the Director of Client Success for North America. My team is responsible for the onboarding and support of all of our Graphisoft clients, fostering our AEC community. And we also provide product and technology insights back to our corporate headquarters. Our mission at Graphisoft is to empower teams to create great buildings, such as the ones that were shown in the two previous presentations. And we do this by delivering technology and resources to design and visualize and document and collaborate at the highest possible standard. I'm also an architect myself, and before joining Graphisoft, I primarily focused on educational work and hospitality projects and international consulting. Our North American headquarters is located in Boston, and we also have an office in Mexico City. My team works with a lot of firms throughout North America, one of them being Papa George Hames Architects in Chicago, as well as Cox Gray Speck Architects in Washington, D.C. So I'm really looking forward to the discussion today, and I am happy to be here. So thank you.
Great. Thank you, Kyla. You can unshare your screen now. I'm going to come to you first with this, Kyla, but I think the first question that I have, especially thinking about Cynthia and Alex's presentations, which showed the kind of use of technology in very different ways. I think when we talk about digitalization, I think we always think about the digitalization of the architecture industry, digital transformation. But what does that actually mean, do you think? Like what when we say digital transformation of the architecture industry, what are we talking about there from your point of view? And I'll come to Cynthia and Alex afterwards. So if you want to start thinking about your response while Kyla gives hers.
Glad you put me in the hot seat first, Ben. So, I think Graphisoft started in the early 80s, right? Which was before I even knew I wanted to be an architect. And at the time, our idea was basically to replicate the world in a virtual space, right? To create a virtual replica of the building. Now I think we're much more focused on things that, Alex was speaking of, and that we're trying to do asset management, really hone in on data and solve really complex problems that, yes, we might be able to do in an analog way, but the technology is just really supporting those decisions for us much faster in a world that is very quickly paced and helping architects do their jobs at a higher level, or anyone in the AEC industry. Obviously, I'm focused on architects today, but I think that's really what we're seeing. I think there's not a common definition, which we haven't seen throughout the industry, but this transformation of how do we use all of these technologies? How do we use the advancements in technologies to make architecture better, make buildings better, but really make our lives better? I think Alex may have peeked at my notes a bit because we have some of the same opinions on, did this make our life better? Is AI taking over? I don't think AI is taking over, but I do think it has strong uses within the practice. I read an article from an HDR project where they actually did use AI to create 100 or so different options for the building. And the architect actually came in after the fact just to go through what those prototypes might be. So they were actually creating the full building rather than components or making decisions after the fact. That's pretty exciting. I'm not sure how we, define creativity and ownership at that point, right? Is it the person that wrote the AI code? Is it the person who put in the information for AI to move forward? Or is it still the architect? And as Alex said, are we going to redefine what architects are in this digital age and who takes ownership of the project? So I hope that that means the architects are still the, the driver of what's being built, and they're at the helm of those decisions. And that, again, as Alex said, that the tools remain as assistants to that process, and not actually the owners of the process.
Great. Thank you, Kyla. And Cynthia, what does digitalization mean to you and your practice?
So to me, and essentially to our practice, I think digitalization just means that we're working towards more effective ways of producing buildings, producing concepts, and exploring the industry as a whole. So I agree with Kyla and Alex that artificial intelligence is not taking over. It cannot take over. And hopefully the role of the architect, being the main designer in most of the projects, stays what it is, if not slightly improve with the use of the new ways of using digital platforms and using BIM and using other information systems that we have in place. So I think that bringing the drawings, I speak from an architectural point of view, bringing drawings and a concept of a building or a project into the digital platform allows architects, engineers, and other team members to effectively and seamlessly be able to collaborate, even though it might not be through the same type of software, but the sharing of information becomes easier, and the evaluation of the cost of the proposed buildings or projects becomes easier to manage. And like Alex said, with their project, when they had to, say, go back to the theater and design it with less seats or whatever, on paper, it would have been slightly more difficult to redefine that. But with the digital platform, you have an opportunity to quickly revise the design. And like Kyla said, you're able to go back and maybe work on different scenarios to what the client is proposing. Maybe you come up with a different solution to what they were not even thinking about. But it's easier now because you're using digital platforms to do that. Whether we're using artificial intelligence, whether we're using whether using augmented reality, whether it's to collaborate or to work on the cost of a building, digitalization of how we work in the architecture and engineering industry allows us to be able to work on the costs, work on the effectiveness, and we can even figure out now what the energy efficiency of a building is, which helps us now to work towards saving our planet that we've been living in, that is in dire need of assistance. So I truly, truly hope that we don't get to a stage where the machines take over, where the role of the architect gets diluted, because they play a really important role in the industry and in piecing together the client concept and bringing it to reality with the technical know-how of the architect and the other team members. So I hope that makes sense.
Definitely, yeah. And I wonder, Alex, to kind of extend the question a little bit, how kind of, I mean, it seems like your practice is quite kind of forward thinking and is doing some very interesting things with technology, but as an industry, how far along do you think architecture, for example, is? Do you find that in terms of like whether that be clients, whether that be contractors, that they're all kind of embracing this, or is it something that you feel like you're fighting against to get people to kind of embrace this technology?
It's a very mixed bag, because on the one hand you have things that are extremely streamlined thanks to digitalization. For example, the New York City Building Department revised their entire filing system to be completely digital. So we don't even stamp, physically anymore. We upload a stamp to a system and there's a set of checks and balances for drawings to be uploaded from the engineers, the architects. The reviews are done online with Zoom now. The examiners go in and they measure your drawings. If they don't believe your square footage is accurate, they can detect it with their own software. And on the flip side, I can cross the river into, say, New Jersey, and they still want me to physically, manually emboss a stamp with a wet seal and come with an easel and do presentations on paper boards, right? Because they don't even have a projector, you know? And so it's a very mixed bag. And you find that one contractor might not have the skills to even understand your drawing set. And you have another one who's using Bluebeam and has sophisticated takeoff software. So it's a mixed bag, but I would say that, you know, digitalization is permeated our entire lives in every way. I mean, not only in the architecture practice, but, you know, your phone, you know, the way we do conference calls, you name it, it's permeated all of our existence, right? It's here. What's interesting is how architecture changed physically. I remember buildings when they were drawn by hand, and there were styles in the 80s that were very permeant. And as people started using AutoCAD, how the building started to reflect a certain rigidity and a pattern and a repetition that were very much of the tool. As we got beyond that into more sophisticated software like BIM and 3D modeling, advanced 3D modeling, you've seen a lot of experimentation with form. And of course, Zaha Hadid's firm and the beautiful work she's done wouldn't be possible if it weren't for these cutting edge tools. So digitalization is permeated through the industry. The question is, you know, where are the key points where it affects change? I can give you something very mundane, very boring, right? But it used to be that we would do drawings and a contractor would say to the owner, well, you've got 20,000 square feet of this material, 10,000 square, and your project's going to cost X, right? Well, now all of a sudden we're doing that because we show up to a meeting and we know exactly how much quantity of materials we have because the BIM model controls it all. And so we're telling the contractor, no, your calculations are wrong. You're charging the client too much. And in fact, if you want us to save, we can just make an adjustment here in the model and reduce the quantity in the same meeting on the fly. And so the power struggle at the table with a contractor may be very different now because of that. So I am interested in how certain tools have evolved to allow roles that have been traditional between the professions to change. And that's dramatic. When I can tell the structural engineer, no, you don't have to worry, you don't have to start from scratch. You can just plug in my BIM model and start doing your calculations from there. You know, some of them scratch their head and they're like, how are you doing this? And 2 weeks later, they come back and say, oh, now I get it. There's this new software. And thank you for introducing to me. You're making my life easier. And so it all boils down to, for me, it boils down to specific tools, not so much the broadband, you know, we're in a digitalized world. It's which tool is changing our lives for better, making our design better, easier, higher quality, more control, you name it. There's qualities to the digitalization that are important to focus on, I think.
Great, thanks, Alex. We're running out of time, and there are a few kind of audience questions that have come through. I'll try to ask as many as I can, and one of them kind of leads on a little bit to this point, which is someone who's asked in the AEC space, which processes are in need of digitalization most? Kyla, I don't know if that's something you'd like to answer.
Sure. You know, we're working with hundreds of firms, thousands of firms on a regular basis. And I do think, you know, what Alex is doing in New York and what Cynthia is doing in South Africa, those are very unique signature projects. But for us, you know, 90% of the firms that we're working with are really trying to get drawings out the door and collaborate as easily as possible with consultants or the contractors. So while I think AI and AR and VR are, you know, extremely powerful tools, looking forward to the future of those, collaboration and kind of a consensus on standards would be a great way for us to kind of focus on digitalization and doing some of those tasks that are really high human capital, right? So existing conditions, specifications, and and coordination, so clash detection. While there are technologies that are obviously doing that, they're not widely adopted. So I don't necessarily think that that's more technology. It's more of getting the community educated and really getting it used and widely adopted is a piece for me. But the collaboration and kind of open standards, I think, was going to be key for us moving forward. Right now, we have a lot of people sitting at the table that are all speaking different digital languages, and we're not able to come to a consensus on how we actually document and share that information. So I think there's a balance between what's the most important technology and how do we educate folks and get those technologies adopted widely across the industry so that we can all benefit from them. And it's not just, 100-person firm versus a sole practitioner, that everybody is really getting the fruits of that labor.
Great. And that kind of leads on to another audience question, which was asking about what the biggest kind of obstacles are in digitalization. I guess from your point of view, would that be maybe like standardization or interoperability or something like that?
100%. I think we don't have an actual true defined standard for North America or for the US specifically. The UK is getting there a bit, right? There's other countries that have adopted BIM mandates, of course. But I think there is a very large lack of consensus on what is the standard, right? And I think if we even had a baseline agreement of where we start from this entering data and how modeling should occur, it would allow us to communicate much easier. And it's really platform independent, right? We're not talking about, I have to be on the same software to talk to people. That's not really the requirement. If the information is the same going into all of those softwares, everyone can talk to each other, or we agree on this neutral file format, which I think is the long-term solution for us to really get to that level of true collaboration, integrated design, and actually working as teams and removing the siloed effect that we still see in the industry.
Great. Thank you, Kyla. I must say the time has flown by and there's so much on this topic to talk about and so many more questions for all of you that I would like to ask, but I do not want to hold up the rest of the conference program. And that does seem like a good note to end on. So thank you very much, Kyla. Thank you, Cynthia, and thank you, Alex, for joining us. Thanks to Graphisoft and for all those who are watching on Dezeen. Remember, this is part of a much bigger conference and you can register, check it out for free. Just go to graphisoft.com. Right. Thank you very much, everyone. And back over to you, Martin,